Nathan Foster, welcome to Making Disciples. I've already commented on my envy for your microphone. I feel like your microphone is making me feel that I need a big microphone. But hey, thank you so much for taking this time with us just to talk about discipleship. I'd love to get straight in and ask you a question about who has influenced you the most in your discipleship? Is there some particular person or
Mhm,
group of people that you would say, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I am now?
mhm, mhm. It's a good question. I think I'd give two pieces to it. Sorry. Um, One is it's been people who just live their life in a sense of faithful ordinariness. So it's not necessarily been really charismatic or even deeply theological or insightful people, but people that just are responding to God well in the midst of their life and their circumstances. And those people inspire me
Yeah,
quite a bit just to see how it can be lived out in
yeah,
ordinariness of life. The other group, and I can go say more on that if you want, but the other group, which is this is going to sound strange, but it's writers, old writers. And I've developed this kind of friendship with people who have passed in the sense of I read their book and it's kind of intimate and you feel like you get to know them and you think, well, it won't be that many years until I get to have a conversation with this person, after I die.
yeah,
And so they're, kind of historic figures. So it's like a Julian of Norwich or Brother Lawrence, a Frank Laubach, that these people have helped disciple me in a kind of strange way of
yeah,
reading their work and hearing their
yeah.
story.
That's great. Hey, I wanted to talk a little bit about daily prayer, spiritual formation. One of the things that we're really wanting to wrestle with making disciples is how do we put in those daily rhythms, those spiritual disciplines that sustain us long term? And I think we live in a society that has no rhythms and a society that's lost that sense of discipline. What
Mm.
have you found personally helpful that has helped you with your daily spiritual disciplines?
That's a good question. I think in terms of spiritual disciplines in two different ways. So there are disciplines that will intentionally set out to practice, like a rhythm of sorts,
Mm.
right? And to kind of prayerfully discern and help discern with other people who know us well. What is some rhythms or practices that are realistic for us to begin? And not be heroic about it,
Yeah,
start small. If you don't have a robust life of prayer practice, spending 2 hours a day is just a setup for failure.
yeah,
So start where you're at, start small, think of the long haul. It's not what you're going to do in the next month, it's what you're going to do in the next 5 years. So finding something you can live with, those intentional pieces,
yeah,
but then also being aware of what's in front of you. So, Chris, I'll work from the mindset that God is ever involved, ever pursuing, ever reaching out to us. And quite honestly, I think a lot of it is just tuning our attention to that. And so it's moments of pause, going, "Hmm, what are you up to here, God? What's going on here?" And usually the best cues for that is anytime we're frustrated, angry, or bored.
mm,
Those are usually the most helpful times to just kind of shift and go, hmm, what would you like to do in this? What do you have to teach me in this? And I think it's really just relational that if we have a kind of interactive relationship with God life, it flows quite naturally, I think, or can at least.
yeah,
Um, but for many people, their view of God is so distorted that they can't even imagine some of these things, that they have to kind of put on the nice shirt before they talk to God. But many of my prayer times is doing dishes, and I just go, "Hi,"
yeah, yeah,
or I go, "I don't like this right now,"
yeah,
and then just listen and see what happens. So those two things, just
yeah,
kind of ordinary opportunities throughout life, and then setting up specific practices intentionally having others help us with that in terms of not setting us up to fail, but what's a realistic rhythm that we should adapt.
Yeah, no, I like that. You talk about ordinary saints and that
Mm-hmm.
language of the sainted in the ordinary, and I love that idea, and I'd love to hear you play around with it for a moment. Just talk to us a little bit. What does it mean to be an ordinary saint?
Mm,
Uh, to have faith that's ordinary but yet not at the same time. Talk around that for a moment.
sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a little play of words. Part of my thinking behind it is um, wanting to rip the saints out of the stained glass. And what I mean by that is, I mean, I'm all about, people from old, people of faith throughout the centuries are so helpful to learn from. But when we put them in the saint category,
Yeah,
it removes us from them. They're saints, I'm not. And so it's this kind of priesthood of all believers. It's the idea that the same spirit that they had access to, we have access to.
yeah,
And this sort of kind of playful challenge of who can we become?
yeah,
And who do we get to become throughout the years? And that the sainthood, however we want to define that. I mean, obviously, some groups will give very specific criteria for that. But the idea that we get to grow and we get to become people who look more like Jesus throughout our life, and that's wonderful,
yeah.
beautiful. So it's that movement away from going, oh yeah, that's them, and I deal with ordinary life and ordinary issues. But no, we're all in
Mm,
this together.
I like that. We have three paintings in our church, and they
Mm-hmm.
were painted by a lady. They actually hung in the Tate Modern, which is a major gallery in central London. I love it. And
Tate,
the
yes, I
Tate,
know
yeah,
it.
three paintings she painted that were there. And I get this call not long after we planted our church here in East London. And she said, I've got these three paintings. They're coming down from the Tate Modern. I don't know what to do with them, but I've always imagined them to be hung in a church. So I said, let me come round and see them. And there's three paintings, beautiful paintings, like meticulous paintings, but really modern, but meticulous, beautifully done, of three individuals. One is a lady that looks quite androgynous. You don't know if she's a guy or a girl really, but we think it's a lady. The next one is of a lady with a handbag. The third one is of a bearded mechanic leather jacket, like a Hell's Angel. And in
Mm-hmm.
these three pictures, one's got a neon green background, one's got a pink background, and one's got a blue background, and all of them have got this white glory coming from them. And I said, "Gosh, these are amazing. What was the vision?" And she said, "I wanted to paint modern day icons, and these are three people that I know from East London that I would describe them as my saints." And I said, "Look,
Mm-hmm.
I love them. Would you come and talk to my church about these paintings?" So we had them up at the front, we covered them up. The congregation come in, they just see these three covers. And then I have her come up and explain the paintings. And she said, each of these people have impacted my life, and I would describe them as modern day saints, ordinary saints. And I said, I love this white thing around them. What is that? And I didn't want to put too many words to it at that point. And she said, I describe that as the aura. And people carry a light within them, and we
Mm-hmm.
choose to either shine the light or we don't. And I was able to say, well, actually, within my spirituality, we would call it the glory of the Lord. It's the light of Christ shining through us.
Mm-hmm.
And they're phenomenal paintings coming from a woman who's not a believer,
Mm-hmm.
but yet sees something in people and says, I want to try and name it. And I was able to say to her, can I help you name this? Because I too
Mm-hmm.
believe that we are all called to be ordinary saints. But
Yeah.
very often we venerate people into stained glass windows. And actually, the call of a disciple is to live the sainthood on the streets. And
Yeah. Yeah.
for me, Saint Francis,
Uh-huh.
who felt called to ministry and mission on the streets. Prayer happened on the paving slabs of the streets, not in the prayer rooms of the holy houses. So
Mm-hmm.
St. Francis for me, just that interesting call back to prayer that happened on the paving slabs of the neighbourhood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's the idea, yeah,
I
like
also
it.
think we respect Francis by putting him in places he would be comfortable. I would imagine he would be quite uncomfortable if he knew how we use him, talk about him, think about him. I could just hear him going,
Yeah,
"No, brother, come with me, right? We do this together.
yeah,
This is available to you as it is to me."
yeah,
That's
yeah. I
fun.
like that. Yeah. Can we just keep pushing into this ordinariness?
Please.
Because I think one of the things that I really, long for. I run a small missional church. For us, there's just this deep sense of how do we encounter God in reality, nuts and bolts, day to day life, the grime of life. I'd love to ask this: how do we go about? I'm not sure the word learning is the right word, but how do we go about learning how to hear the voice of God in the noise of life? And again, the word learning is not the right word, but that sense of what do we do, how do we explore how we hear the voice of God in the normalness?
Yeah, maybe we might play with the word discern. How
Yeah,
do we discern the voice of God in the midst of all the other noise? Um, eh, I mean, kind of a short answer is I think it's a lot of time, and we're thinking of years of kind of practice with that. Probably the simplest way is just to turn the noise off that's already there. So most people, um, if they just carved out 10 minutes of silence, and when I say silence, I mean like really, I'm being still before God without all the props. I'm just here I am. I'm present and I'm listening. And being in those spaces with some regularity, I think is extremely helpful. But most of us just live really noisy lives, and it's very rare where there's just everything is unplugged and we're just being still. Here I am. I'm before you, God, with no particular expectation, but I'm available. And developing that type of a practice for, add 5, 10 years to it, we might get to discern some of those pieces.
yeah. I want
But
to
for many of us, it's hard. It's very hard and scary to do.
I want to just push back on that a little bit,
Please.
in that lots of people that be watching this come from all over the UK and further afield. Many of us live in rural settings. Many of us
Mm-hmm.
live in towns and villages where you can hear the voice of birds.
Mm.
Where I live in East London, most of what I hear is planes flying overhead, police cars going by, the noise of the buses, the streets, people shouting in the streets. It's noisy even when you're trying to be quiet. You disconnect from your mobile phone. There's still just noise, and it's. I'm trying to help people find silence, find hearing God in the noise, even when you can't switch the noise off,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
that's where most of us live our lives, where we want silence but we just can't get it if we tried.
Mm-hmm.
So can I just
Mm-hmm.
push that back and say, hang on, can I push a little bit more on that?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
I don't know what that'd be like to live right in the
yeah,
middle of London where there literally is no silence, other than to say intentionally shutting out the noise that we bring.
yeah,
So it's turning the phone off, turning the TV off, shutting the computer down, the email beeping at you. So oftentimes it's nearly impossible to have total silence, but that's okay. I use it as prompts for prayer.
yeah,
So if I was in London and I
yeah,
intentionally said, okay, I'm going to be quiet, and then the police siren goes, right? I tune into that. God, what's going on here? What might you have me pray about with this? Or I hear kids running outside. So rather than seeing those as distractions, seeing those as invitations for part of our life together with God.
yeah,
That'd be maybe one simple thing, but boy, I don't know what that would be like to
yeah.
where you could never find silence.
I like that. I like the idea of using it for props for prayer. My mentor is a 67-year-old Anglo-Catholic priest. His mother worked for Mother Teresa in Calcutta, and they moved to London
Mm-hmm.
somewhat in the 80s, and he's been ministering in East London for years upon years upon years. And one of the things that he does now is he goes prayer bombing. and
Okay.
he gets on the bus and uses the things that he sees while on the bus as props for prayer. And if he sees an argument happening, he says, I prayer bomb them. I pray Lord's blessing over them. And if I hear something on the bus, or I see an incident in the road, or a shop that I go by, that just God just gives me, my attention is on that now. I don't know why, but my attention's on that. And he'll prayer bomb. And, we've got to be really careful with that language, particularly in this day and age. But just the idea
Sure.
of praying over the things that you see as the props for prayer. And we can be trying to say, oh, let's get rid of that noise and get rid of that noise. But actually, if the noise is there, maybe God wants you to use the noise. Maybe the noise.
Yeah, certainly can.
Okay,
Certainly
let's
can.
ask you another question. A number of years ago, you were speaking for us at Spring Harvest.
Oh, wait, can I say one quick
Yeah.
thing? Boredom, prayer
God,
bombing. When we're bored, those are opportunities. We usually run from boredom. But
yeah.
if you're on the bus and you're bored, you pray.
Yeah.
Yeah, at any rate.
Yeah, I like that. Now, you were preaching for us at Spring Harvest, and there was this electric moment where everybody in the venue expected you to pray a nice little prayer about the passage or something. And you stood there and you said gently, Father, come find us. Daddy, come find us. And you said it about 3 times, and the room suddenly shrank and people leant in, and it was beautiful. And I've actually ended up using that in my own personal prayer life. Often when I feel like I'm distant from God, or I'm just needing to know his intentional closeness. So this prayer, Father, come find us, is so different. Where did you get that? Where did that come from? What do you use that often?
It's a good question. I don't know where I picked it up. Part of what it is at Spring Harvest, great experience. Thinking that there are people who've come, they don't know what to do. They're wanting God, they're wanting something deeper, and they're showing up. Here I am, right? And the picture I have with it is like a little kid who's lost, going, come find me, right? God, come find me. And so it's this maybe a space of humility, a space of longing, and then a space of waiting. Like, I'm doing all I can. I'm here. My heart's open. My mind's open. Will you come find us? Will you? So I like to pray, and I'll often do it multiple times. All right, I'll say it, and it's this kind of longing, like I really want you here, and I don't know how to make that happen other than just to be present and with an open heart. Thanks for that. Yeah, that was a good time with you guys.
Something happened when you prayed, Father, come find us. And I think I've just found that incredibly helpful at times when I not know what to pray. And we do sometimes feel lost, don't we? Even though we know our Father's there, we feel lost. We just feel like we need help. And sometimes we can't pray. And, Scripture says, to pray with groans of the heart. Well, actually, I really found that phrase, Father, come find me, almost like the groaning of the heart. Father, I'm here. I want to hear you. And I want to experience you. So I found that incredibly helpful, and that came from you. So I only that's where I got that from.
No, I'm sure I borrowed it from someone.
I did try it once when preaching. I just felt like I want to try that, and I did it, and it didn't work at all. There was no. It was definitely your thing. So take it.
Well, I will say when I'm speaking and I pray at the beginning, it's as much for me as anyone else. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly
it's like.
Yeah.
That's a genuine, like, I'm a little lost here on this stage with lots of people.
I want to ask one last question, just something
Please.
I'm wrestling with at the moment around prayer and my congregation here that I think might be helpful for others. I often keep hearing people saying prayer is not taught, it's caught. You catch prayer, you can't teach prayer. I'm not necessarily sure I'm fully there with you can't teach about prayer. But I am certainly there that prayer needs to be something we capture. And have you got a sense of how we can help others catch a deep longing for prayer, what would you say to somebody who is saying, I'm struggling to pray, help me? What's your wisdom for prayer?
That's a good question. I actually don't know that phrase about prayer being caught. I'll use it in terms of spiritual formation. It's as much caught as taught, that we learn from each other and from just being in the room together and catch something, No, so let me see if I can think of it in terms of prayer. Certainly you can teach prayer, but prayer's practice. I mean, you gotta, anything you're learning, you gotta go try it on for, a few months or something. So it's definitely a practice. Maybe caught in terms of, okay, I'll connect one. People who live a life of deep devotion and prayer, it just exudes from them, like the pictures of the saints your friend had, right? Just kind of.
Yeah.
So it maybe there's probably something where we're around people who live a life of genuine, right? I mean, it's that kind of quiet settledness. Maybe some of that rubs off on us. I don't know. Yeah. But certainly it can be taught, but it does need to be practiced.
Yeah.
But the community, being together, Spring Harvest is a great example. Just being there, you're going to catch something.
I think that's the whole thing about the rabbinical discipleship, is that so much of learning from your rabbi was catching what your rabbi carried.
Okay.
And it wasn't so much what the rabbi taught, it's seeing how the rabbi did it. And the rabbi would teach, as rabbis do teach, but then they were watching them intently, because I want to see how Rabbi Jesus does it. So when they say Jesus teaches to pray, they're saying, we want to pray like you, and he gives them an experience, and he shows them prayer in the Garden of Eden. It's all caught as they catch something of what it means to carry what their rabbi carried. Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for our time together. And I'd love to catch up with you again at some time later down the line, because I think the way that you talk about spiritual discipline, the way that you talk about spending time in the presence of God is just refreshing, because it's so not about chasing the big thing. It's about finding God in the smallness. And I think that is that's what people are longing for. That's what we're all longing for, is finding God in the normality of life, not in the big stadiums of life. It's the reality. So Nathan, thank you for your time. Bless you, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Bye.